The jungle was alive with sound. Birds called from high branches, insects hummed in the thick air, and the steady rhythm of footsteps pressed deeper into the green maze. Rami moved carefully, one hand brushing aside heavy leaves, the other gripping his worn satchel. He had been traveling for many days, following faint trails and markings on an old map. His boots sank into soft earth and sweat rolled down his face, but his eyes stayed sharp. He was close, he could feel it. Somewhere in this wild place, hidden under vines and stone, was the tomb he had dreamed about since childhood. Rami had grown up listening to stories told by his grandfather. The old man spoke of the Mayan people, of temples rising high above the trees, and of strange relics said to hold power beyond human understanding. Among the tales, one story always stood out, the legend of the crystal skull. It was said to guard a tomb no man had ever fully uncovered. Some believed it was a treasure of the gods, others said it was cursed. To Rami, it was a mystery worth finding. The sun was sinking when he reached a clearing. The air grew cooler, and the ground rose gently toward a hill covered in thick vines. At first it looked like nothing but jungle, yet as he stepped closer he saw patterns in the growth. Stone blocks, walls half buried under roots. Rami's heart quickened. This was no hill. It was a structure, an ancient one. He pulled a small brush from his bag and knelt to clear the surface. Dust and moss came away, revealing carvings that spiraled across the stone. The shapes were not random. They formed circles, triangles, and strange symbols. At the center, a series of dots and lines stretched in a way that looked like stars. Rami leaned back, breathless. This was no ordinary temple wall. It was a map of the night sky. Night fell quickly in the jungle. Rami lit a small lantern and sat near the carvings, studying each detail. The villagers he had met on his way had warned him not to come. They spoke in hushed voices of a guardian spirit, of glowing eyes deep within the tomb. Some refused even to mention the skull, as though the very word might bring misfortune. Rami had listened with respect, but he could not turn away. Legends were born from truth, and truth was what he sought. A soft breeze stirred the trees above, and for a moment Rami thought he heard a whisper. He looked up sharply. Nothing but shadows. Still the air felt heavier, as if the jungle itself was watching him. He shook off the feeling and traced the carvings again. They pointed toward the base of the hill where vines hung thick like curtains. Lantern in hand, he pushed through the growth. Behind it lay a narrow passage framed by stone pillars. The opening was small, almost hidden, but it was clear this was an entrance. He crouched low and stepped inside. The air within was cool and dry. His lantern light danced across walls covered in faded paint. Red and gold lines still clung to the stone, showing scenes of warriors, priests, and strange shapes in the sky. Rami moved slowly, every sound echoing against the chamber. His steps stirred dust that had lain undisturbed for centuries. At the far end of the passage, he found a staircase leading down. He hesitated, his pulse quick. This was what he had searched for, but the weight of the moment pressed on him. He thought of his grandfather's voice warning him that some doors should remain closed. Yet his own voice, the one that had driven him across miles of jungle, whispered louder. If he turned back now, the mystery would remain unsolved forever. He placed one foot on the step, then another. The staircase descended into darkness, but his lantern kept the path clear. As he went deeper, the air grew colder. At last, the stairs ended in a chamber. The ceiling was high, supported by stone columns carved with spirals and symbols. At the center stood a pedestal, empty but for scattered fragments of crystal that shimmered faintly in the light. Rami approached, his breath shallow. The villagers had said the skull waited inside, yet here there was nothing but broken shards. He reached out and touched one. It was cool, almost icy, and as his fingers brushed the surface, a faint hum filled the air. He froze. The sound seemed to come from the walls themselves. Slowly the dust around him shifted as though the chamber were waking from a long sleep. A sudden draft swept through the room, extinguishing his lantern. Darkness swallowed him whole. Only the faint glow of the crystal pieces remained, shining like stars scattered across the stone floor. Rami knelt, pressing his hand against them, and for the first time he wondered if he had gone too far. Above him, unseen in the shadows, a pair of points of light flickered. They were not shards nor reflections. They were eyes glowing faintly, watching him in silence. Rami did not move. His heart pounded, yet he could not look away. The legend was true. The tomb was guarded. The crystal skull was real, and it was awake. Rami stood frozen in the darkness of the chamber. His lantern was out, yet the faint shimmer of crystal pieces lit the floor like stars. High above, the two glowing points of light did not move. They hovered, steady and watchful. His breath came in sharp, shallow bursts, but he did not dare to take a step back. The silence of the tomb pressed around him, broken only by the steady hum that rose from the crystal fragments. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the stone floor until it felt like the air itself carried a rhythm. Slowly, the two glowing points shifted downward. They were not stars, not tricks of the light. They were eyes, shining from within the shape of a skull made of pure crystal. The skull emerged from the shadows, resting upon the pedestal at the center of the chamber. It was larger than Rami had expected, carved with perfect precision, every edge gleaming faintly even in the dark. The glowing eyes were not flames but inner light, as though something alive pulsed inside it. Rami's hands trembled as he lowered himself to one knee without realizing. He could feel its presence in his mind, sharp and ancient. Then, without sound, a voice filled the chamber. It was not heard through his ears, but inside his thoughts. "You enter the sacred place of the stars," the voice said, calm yet firm. "Why do you come?" Rami's mouth went dry. He tried to speak, but no sound came. The voice did not wait for an answer. "Long have I guarded this tomb," it continued. "I have watched men pass, some seeking gold, others seeking power. All failed. You are different, but the question remains, are you worthy of what lies beyond?" Rami forced his voice out, rough but steady. "I do not seek gold. I came to learn, to understand the truth of the stories." The crystal skull's glow pulsed softly like the rhythm of a heart. "Truth is not given freely. Truth is earned. If you wish to pass deeper, you must face the trial. Only then will the tomb reveal its secrets." Rami swallowed hard. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind, warning him that this journey could not be undone. But the fire of curiosity inside him burned stronger than fear. He nodded. "I accept." The chamber shifted. The floor beneath his feet trembled, and the walls groaned as hidden mechanisms stirred to life. Stones slid and turned, forming new patterns across the surface. The pedestal sank slowly into the ground, carrying the skull with it until it was level with his chest. The crystal eyes fixed on him, and the hum grew louder, shaking the very air. "Step forward," the voice commanded. Rami obeyed. As his boots crossed the floor, light burst from the fragments around him. The broken pieces of crystal rose into the air, circling him like fragments of a shattered star. They spun faster and faster until they formed a glowing ring around him. The chamber was no longer dark. Symbols carved into the walls lit up, golden and bright, filling the space with shifting patterns. The skull spoke again. "This is the first step, to stand before the unknown without fear. But courage alone is not enough. You will be tested." Suddenly, the floor behind him fell away, leaving only darkness. A pathway of stone blocks stretched ahead, each one narrow and uneven. Below, he could hear rushing water, deep and violent, hidden in the shadows. The message was clear. He must cross. Rami took a deep breath. His legs shook, but he stepped onto the first block. It wobbled slightly, but held. He fixed his eyes on the far side of the chamber, where another doorway had appeared. Step by step, he moved forward. The roar of the unseen water grew louder with each step. Halfway across, one of the stones shifted beneath him. He lost balance, his arms flailing. For a heartbeat, he thought he would fall, but he dropped to his knees, clinging to the edge. Sweat dripped into his eyes. He pulled himself back up, breathing hard, and forced his legs to move again. At last, he reached the final block. With a final push, he leapt across the gap and landed on the solid floor. His chest heaved, his muscles ached, but he was alive. The skull's glow dimmed, then brightened again. "You have taken the first trial. You did not turn away. You did not let fear consume you. Remember this moment." The floor behind him sealed shut, leaving no sign of the path he had crossed. The chamber shifted again, and the pedestal rose higher. The skull's eyes glowed brighter than before, casting long shadows across the walls. "Beyond this chamber lies knowledge," it said. "Knowledge not of gold or power, but of the stars themselves. The people who built this place were guided by hands not of this world. I was left behind to guard it until one worthy arrived." Rami's heart raced. This was what he had hoped for, what he had dreamed about. Proof that the legends were real. He stared into the shining eyes of the skull, knowing his journey had only begun. The skull's voice softened, though it still filled his mind. "You have courage, Seeker. But courage must walk beside wisdom and honor. Ahead lie greater trials. If you are not ready, you will not survive. Think carefully before you step forward. Rami straightened his shoulders. He was afraid, yes, but the fear only sharpened his resolve. He had come too far to turn back. I will continue, he said. The skull glowed brighter, and the sealed doorway ahead slid open, revealing a new passage stretching into the unknown. Then enter, the voice said. The true test begins now. Rami stepped through the doorway, lantern in hand, though the skull's glow still lingered behind him. The passage stretched long and narrow, the walls lined with carvings of warriors and animals. Some figures seemed human, but others looked strange, with long heads and wide eyes like beings from another world. His steps echoed softly, and each sound reminded him he was deep inside a tomb built by hands long gone. As he walked, he thought about the skull's warning. Courage, wisdom, and honor. The first test had been only the beginning. What lay ahead could be far worse. Still, his heart told him there was no turning back. The secret of the tomb was calling him, and he had to follow. The passage soon opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling arched high above, vanishing into shadow. The walls were smooth stone, except for strange symbols glowing faintly in lines that circled the room. At the center stood a wide path made of square tiles, each carved with patterns. Beyond the path, on the far wall, stood a heavy stone door sealed shut. The skull's voice returned, not from behind him, but inside his mind once more. This is the trial of courage, it said. The path is dangerous. Each step will test you. You must move forward with a steady heart. If fear rules you, you will not survive. Rami tightened his grip on the lantern and stepped onto the first tile. The floor shuddered, and part of the ceiling shifted. Long stone darts shot downward, missing him by only an arm's length. He jumped back, his chest pounding. The voice spoke again. Fear will cloud your mind. Control it or be lost. He took a deep breath, forcing his body to calm. The second tile waited ahead. With careful steps, he moved forward. This time the floor sank slightly under his weight, and flames burst from narrow cracks in the wall. Heat rushed against his skin, but he kept his balance and crossed to the next tile. The chamber grew darker, the lantern's light flickering weakly as if swallowed by the air. Rami's hands shook, but he clenched his jaw and pressed onward. Each tile brought a new danger: falling stones, sharp spikes, bursts of cold air that tried to knock him off balance. The tomb was alive, testing his every move. Halfway across, his legs began to tremble with exhaustion. He paused, standing on a single narrow tile, and looked back. The safe ground seemed so far away, yet ahead the door waited, still sealed but glowing faintly. For a moment, doubt filled him. What if he failed? What if he fell before reaching the end? The skull's voice whispered again. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward in spite of fear. Rami closed his eyes and steadied his breathing. He thought of his grandfather, who had spoken of the skull with such reverence. He thought of the villagers who had feared this place. And he thought of himself, the boy who had dreamed of uncovering the truth. He could not stop now. He opened his eyes and stepped forward again. The tiles ahead grew trickier. Some crumbled when touched, forcing him to leap quickly to another. Others spun when he stepped on them, threatening to throw him off balance. His body ached, his arms scraped against sharp edges, but he did not stop. One tile sent a deep crack through the floor, revealing a pit below filled with rushing water. He nearly slipped, his boot dangling above the drop, but he pulled himself forward with a desperate push. At last, only 3 tiles remained. Rami's chest heaved, his throat dry, but the door was closed now. He stepped onto the next tile, and the entire chamber shook. The walls lit up with blazing symbols, and the floor behind him collapsed, leaving nothing but a chasm. There was no going back now. Do not look behind, the voice said firmly. Look only ahead, Rami obeyed. He fixed his eyes on the sealed door and took another step. The tile cracked under his weight, but he jumped before it could fall. He landed hard on the final stone, his knees almost giving way, but he forced himself upright. Before him, the great stone door began to shift, grinding open with a slow roar. The glow from within spilled across the chamber, bathing him in golden light. The skull's voice spoke again, calm but strong. You have passed the trial. You faced fear and did not yield. The path of courage is yours. Rami staggered forward, crossing through the opening. The chamber behind him sealed, and silence returned. Ahead stretched a new hall, glowing with light that came from no flame. The walls shimmered as though stars had been captured inside them. Rami's exhaustion faded as awe filled him. This was no ordinary tomb. It was something greater, something not entirely human. He walked slowly, his fingers brushing the glowing walls. Images shifted across the surface, showing shapes of planets, constellations, and ships sailing through the skies. The Mayans had carved symbols, but these were different. These were not carvings, they were visions. The skull's voice returned, softer now. You are beginning to see. This place is not only a tomb, it is a message left for those who can prove themselves. The Mayans built around it, but what lies at its heart is not of this earth. Rami felt his breath catch. The old stories had been true. The skull was not a relic of men, but a guardian of knowledge far older and far greater, and he was walking toward that knowledge. The hall ended in another doorway, this one marked by a great circle filled with glowing patterns. The door slid open as he approached, as though welcoming him. Rami stepped through, his heart beating with excitement and dread. Behind him, the skull's voice whispered one last time. You have shown courage. Now you must show wisdom. The trials grow harder. Be ready, seeker. Rami squared his shoulders and moved forward into the new chamber, ready for what waited. Rami stepped into the new chamber with cautious steps. The air was cooler here, almost sharp, and the light glowed brighter than in the last hall. It came not from torches or fire, but from the walls themselves. Strange symbols shimmered across them, moving slowly as if alive. They formed circles, lines, and shapes of stars, shifting as he watched. At the center of the chamber stood a tall stone pillar. Upon it rested another crystal piece, smaller than the skull but glowing with the same inner light. As Rami approached, the pillar trembled and the walls around him lit up fully, filling the room with golden radiance. The crystal skull's voice returned in his mind. You have shown courage. Now you must see the truth. This place was not built only by human hands. Look closely, seeker, and understand. The glowing walls began to change. The symbols stretched outward, forming images as clear as paintings. Rami saw the Mayan people gathered in a great plaza, their temples rising high under the sun. But above them, ships hung in the sky, vast and shining, nothing like any human creation. Their shapes were sleek, with glowing lines running along their sides. The people looked up with awe, not fear. Rami gasped. His heart pounded as the visions continued. Beings emerged from the ships, tall and slender, with eyes that glowed faintly like the crystal skull. Their faces were strange, but their gestures were calm. The Mayan priest stepped forward, bowing in respect, and the beings reached out their hands, not in conquest but in greeting. The skull's voice echoed softly. Long ago, visitors came from the stars. They shared wisdom of the heavens, knowledge of numbers, of time, of energy. The Mayan people listened and learned, building temples to honor the connection. They guarded this bond with devotion, but the visitors could not remain. They left behind their gifts and one guardian to protect them. The image shifted. Rami saw the crystal skull itself glowing brightly as the star beings placed it in the hands of the priests. He saw how the Mayans built the tomb around it, not as a prison but as a sanctuary. The skull watched over them, guiding their rulers and priests until the time came for it to rest in silence. Rami stood still, his breath caught in his chest. He had dreamed of uncovering the truth, but never had he imagined this. The stories were not myths. They were fragments of memory, passed down through generations. The Mayans had not simply looked at the stars. They had met those who traveled among them. The skull's voice continued, now closer, as if it were beside him. You understand now. This tomb is more than stone and memory. It is a message across time. The people of the stars trusted humans to guard their wisdom, waiting for the day when another seeker would prove ready to learn. Rami placed a hand on the glowing wall. The light warmed his skin. He whispered, almost afraid of his own voice. Why me? Why now? The skull answered, calm and steady. Because you came not for gold, not for power, but for truth. That is why the tomb opened for you. That is why the trials did not destroy you. You stand here because your heart carries respect, and respect is the key. The words filled him with both pride and weight. He had wanted to uncover secrets, but now he realized what he carried was far greater. This was not just knowledge of the past, but a bridge to something beyond humanity itself. The walls shifted again, showing more visions. Rami saw maps of stars, each glowing point connected by lines. Some constellations were familiar, but others stretched far beyond what he knew. He saw patterns of energy, strange symbols showing how power could be drawn from the very air. He saw great vessels sailing between planets, carrying light across the void. Yet one vision unsettled him. It showed the Mayans fading away, their cities abandoned, their temples swallowed by jungle. The skull remained, waiting in silence while the memory of the visitors turned into legend. Humanity had forgotten, leaving the Guardian to watch alone. Rami's heart ached as he watched. He thought of the villagers who feared the tomb, who spoke only in whispers of the crystal skull. They had inherited fragments of a story too great for time to carry whole. The truth had been buried just like the tomb itself. The skull's voice grew stronger. Now you see, Seeker, this tomb does not guard gold. It guards a promise. The people of the stars will return when humanity is ready. Until then, the Guardian must remain, keeping their knowledge safe. Rami bowed his head. He felt the weight of history pressing on him, yet also a spark of hope. If what he saw was true, then humanity's place in the universe was far greater than anyone had guessed. Slowly, the pillar in the center of the room lowered, carrying the glowing crystal piece down into the floor. The chamber dimmed, though the wall still shone faintly like embers. A new doorway appeared at the far end, its outline glowing bright. The skull spoke one final time before silence returned. You have seen the truth. But knowing is not enough. The next trial awaits. Wisdom must guide your steps, for without it, courage will fall to ruin. Prepare yourself, Seeker. The path grows harder. Rami lifted his lantern and stood tall. His body was tired, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. He had come for answers, and he had found them. The tomb was more than he could have imagined, but he knew there was more to uncover. With steady steps, he walked toward the glowing doorway, ready for what came next. The glowing doorway closed behind Rami as he stepped into another wide chamber. The air felt still, yet charged, as though the very walls held their breath. Columns rose high on each side, carved with spirals that glimmered faintly. At the center stood a pool of calm water, its surface reflecting the light of unseen stars above. Rami approached slowly. His mind still replayed the visions he had seen, of ships from the skies and the Mayan people meeting them. His heart felt heavy with the weight of such knowledge, but also alive with wonder. He crouched by the water and touched the surface. Ripples spread outward and the reflection shifted. Instead of his own face, he saw the crystal skull glowing in the water's depth. Its voice echoed once more. Seeker, the tomb has watched many who entered before you. Few passed even the first trial. You are closer to the heart of its secret than any before. But know this, danger does not always come from the tomb. Sometimes danger comes from men themselves. Rami frowned, unsure of the meaning. Before he could ask, the reflection faded and the chamber dimmed. The water became still again, showing only his weary face. Moments later, a sound reached his ears, distant footsteps. They were heavy, careless, and too many to belong to one person. Rami rose quickly and held his lantern high. From the passage he had entered, voices echoed, "Here, over this way." His stomach tightened. He was not alone. Out of the shadows, a group of men emerged. Their clothes were rugged, their faces rough with greed. Some carried tools, others carried weapons. At their head was a tall man with sharp eyes and a cruel smile. He looked at Rami with little interest, then fixed his gaze on the chamber. "So it is true," the man said. "The skull is real, and this place is filled with secrets." Rami stepped back. "You should not be here. This tomb is not for treasure hunters." The tall man laughed. "Treasure hunters? No, boy. We are seekers of fortune." The villagers spoke of a foreigner wandering into the jungle, chasing ghost stories. "We followed, and here we are. You did the hard work of finding the path, and now we will take what belongs to us." Rami's chest burned with anger. It belongs to no man. This tomb is a legacy of something greater. It must be protected, but the men ignored him. They spread across the chamber, eyes hungry as they studied the glowing walls. One of them dropped a sack on the ground, pulling out chisels and ropes. Another peered into the water, muttering about the riches it might hide. The tall man stepped closer to Rami. "Stand aside. You are lucky to be alive in this place. Walk away and I may let you leave with your life. Stay in our way and you will regret it." Rami's heart raced. He knew these men cared nothing for truth or history. They wanted only gold and power. If they reached the skull, they would try to take it and the tomb would suffer. He clenched his fists, searching for courage. Before he could answer, the chamber stirred. The symbols on the columns brightened and the water rippled violently without touch. The men staggered back in shock. The tall man shouted, "What is this? What trick is this?" The skull's voice thundered through the chamber, louder than before. "Intruders. You come not with respect but with greed. This tomb is not yours to claim." The men froze, fear flashing in their eyes, but their leader sneered. "A voice in the dark does not scare me. We will take what we came for." The ground shook. Cracks spread across the floor, and the pool's water rose in twisting streams, circling like serpents. One of the men cried out, dropping his tools. Another tried to run back toward the passage, but the doorway sealed with a heavy crash of stone. They were trapped inside. Rami looked around, realizing the tomb itself was reacting to their presence. The guardian was angry. The skull's glow filled the walls, casting long shadows across the hunters' faces. The tall man drew a blade, shouting, "Find it! Find the skull!" The hunters scattered, rushing toward the carvings and columns, searching blindly. But every step they took awakened more defenses. Tiles shifted, releasing bursts of air that knocked men from their feet. Carvings lit with beams of light that burned into the floor. The pool's water crashed onto the stones, sweeping tools away. Rami stood firm. He knew the tomb trusted him, not them. This was his moment to act. He raised his voice, speaking to the skull. "Guardian, I will protect this place. Tell me what I must do." The skull's voice answered, calmer now. "You must stand against them. The tomb will aid you. Prove that humans can guard, not only destroy." Rami nodded. He turned to face the hunters. His body trembled, but his spirit was steady. He shouted over the chaos. "You cannot win here. This tomb will not let you." The tall man glared at him with rage. "Then we will cut you down first." He charged forward, but the ground beneath him split open, forcing him back. Rami realized the tomb responded to his courage. If he stood strong, it would help him drive the intruders away. The chamber roared with power as the hunters struggled. Rami braced himself. The fight to protect the skull had begun. The chamber shook as the hunters tried to fight against the power of the tomb. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the glow of the carvings grew brighter with each passing second. The men shouted to one another, their voices filled with fear and anger. They had come expecting gold and jewels, but now they found themselves against something far older and stronger. Rami stood at the edge of the pool, his lantern flickering but still burning. His heart pounded as he watched the chaos unfold. The skull's voice filled his mind once more. "Seeker, do not fear. The tomb answers to your spirit. Stand firm and you will not fall." Rami clenched his fists. He had never been a fighter, never someone who sought battle, yet in that moment he felt a strange strength rising within him. He was not just protecting a tomb of stone and treasure. He was guarding a legacy of knowledge, a bridge between worlds. The tall leader of the hunters roared, trying to rally his men. "Ignore the tricks. Break the walls. Find the skull." Two men rushed toward the columns, swinging heavy hammers. But the carvings glowed and released bursts of light that struck the tools from their hands. The hammers flew across the chamber, clanging against stone. One man fell to his knees in shock, while the other stumbled back, shielding his eyes. The leader snarled, then turned his attention on Rami. His eyes burned with rage. "This is your doing, isn't it? You speak to this place. You command it." Rami stood tall, though his body trembled. "I do not command it. I respect it. That is something you will never understand." With a shout, the leader charged forward. The ground shook beneath his steps, but he pressed on, swinging his blade high. Rami braced himself, certain the weapon would strike. But before it could fall, the pool erupted. A column of water rose like a living wall, crashing between them. The leader was thrown back, his blade clattering to the floor. The hunters gasped, some stepping back in terror. Rami stared at the water, which slowly settled again into the pool. He understood now. The tomb was not only protecting itself, it was protecting him. One of the hunters cried out, "This place is cursed. We must leave." The leader snarled at him. "Coward, there is no curse. There is power here, and it will be mine." He turned to the others. "Take the boy. If the tomb protects him, then he is the key. With him, we can control it." The hunters hesitated, but greed outweighed their fear. Two of them rushed toward Rami, ropes in hand. Rami stepped back, but before they could reach him, the floor cracked. Long stone slabs shifted upward, forming a barrier around him. The hunters slammed into the stone and fell back. The skull's voice echoed again. "The tomb tests not only intruders, but also guardians. Stand strong, Rami. Show that you are worthy." Rami took a deep breath. His fear did not vanish, but he no longer felt alone. The tomb's spirit was with him. He turned his gaze to the hunters. "You should leave now. The tomb will not let you win." But the leader laughed, his voice wild. "Leave with nothing? Never." If I cannot take the skull, I will take your life." He grabbed his fallen blade and rushed forward again, fury driving his steps. The chamber shook harder as though warning him. Still he came. Rami braced himself, raising his arms though he had no weapon. The carvings on the walls flared with sudden light. From them, beams shot across the chamber, crossing into patterns above. The ceiling shimmered, and from it descended a glowing form. It was not a figure of flesh, but of pure light shaped like a warrior. Its eyes shone bright, and in its hands it held a staff made of energy. The hunters froze, staring in awe and terror. Even Rami stepped back, stunned by the sight. The skull's voice rang clear. "The guardian of the tomb now stands before you. It rises only when balance is threatened. Those who come with greed will face its judgment." The glowing warrior raised its staff and struck the floor. A shockwave spread through the chamber, knocking the hunters to the ground. Tools flew from their hands, ropes snapped, and weapons shattered. The leader, however, refused to yield. He staggered back to his feet, his blade still clutched tight. He shouted at the figure of light, "I will not bow. No tomb will rule me." He rushed forward, swinging wildly. But the guardian moved with grace beyond human speed. The staff blocked the blade with a flash, then pushed the leader back with a single strike of energy. The man crashed into the ground, his weapon breaking apart. The hunters scrambled, fear finally breaking their greed. Some begged for mercy, others tried to flee. But the sealed doorway still stood firm. They were trapped with the guardian. Rami watched, his heart heavy. He did not wish for their destruction, yet he knew the tomb must protect itself. He raised his voice. "Guardian, show them that this place is sacred, not theirs to steal. Do not destroy, but warn." The glowing figure turned its gaze on him. For a moment the chamber fell silent. Then the guardian struck the floor again. This time the shockwave pushed the hunters toward the sealed doorway. The stone shifted, slowly opening, revealing the dark passage beyond. The hunters scrambled, fleeing without a word. Their leader was the last to rise, his eyes filled with fury and shame. He glared at Rami one last time before stumbling into the passage. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud. Silence returned. The glow of the guardian softened, then faded until only the carvings remained lit. The pool became calm once more. Rami stood alone in the chamber, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He had faced not only men, but also the trial of the tomb itself. The skull's voice spoke gently now. "You have shown courage and wisdom. The tomb accepts you as its guardian. But your journey is not yet done. The final truth awaits beyond." Rami looked at the glowing walls and felt a new strength in his heart. He was ready to face whatever came next. The chamber was silent again, the echoes of the hunters fading into the distance. Only the soft glow of the carvings and the calm surface of the pool remained. Rami stood still, his breath steadying as he tried to grasp what had just happened. He had faced the hunters, he had seen the guardian of light, and he had been chosen to stand where no outsider had stood before. The voice of the skull filled his thoughts once more. It was calm, almost gentle. "You have proven yourself worthy, Rami, but one final path lies ahead. Beyond this chamber rests the heart of the tomb. There you will see the truth the skull has guarded for centuries." Rami looked around. He had seen no other passage, yet as he focused, he noticed that the pool at the center of the chamber shimmered strangely. Ripples moved across it, though nothing disturbed the surface. Slowly, a pattern formed like a doorway of light within the water. His chest tightened. Was he meant to step into it? The thought of walking into the unknown filled him with both fear and wonder. He remembered the words of his grandfather. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to walk forward despite it." Rami tightened the strap of his satchel, took one deep breath, and stepped forward. The water rose around him like a curtain, cool but not drowning. Then it cleared, and he found himself in a new space. The chamber beyond was vast and unlike anything he had seen before. Its walls were carved not only with Mayan symbols, but also with patterns that looked almost like stars and planets. The ceiling was high and curved like the inside of a dome, and it glowed faintly as though reflecting the night sky. At the center stood a tall pedestal, and upon it rested the crystal skull. This was no fragment, no broken shard. This was the skull, whole and perfect, its surface shining with a light that seemed to come from within. Its eyes glowed softly, not with menace, but with wisdom. Rami approached slowly, his footsteps echoing across the stone floor. As he drew near, the skull's voice spoke again, no longer only inside his mind, but filling the chamber itself. You have reached the heart of the tomb. Long ago the Mayan people placed me here to guard their secrets. I am more than stone. I carry memory, knowledge, and vision. Few have ever stood here. Now you must choose what to do with this gift." Rami stopped at the base of the pedestal. His hands trembled as he looked up at the skull. He had imagined this moment for years, but the weight of it was far greater than he had expected. "What truth do you guard?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The skull glowed brighter. The walls of the chamber came alive, the carvings shifting into moving pictures of light. Rami saw visions of the past, Mayan priests standing beneath the stars, recording patterns of the sky with astonishing precision. He saw them crafting monuments, temples, and calendars guided by knowledge not from this world alone. Then he saw the skull itself, lowered into the tomb by hands both human and otherworldly. Beings of light, tall and radiant, stood beside the priests offering guidance before fading into the sky. Rami's heart pounded. The skull was not only a relic, it was a bridge. It carried the memory of both the Mayan people and the visitors they had met. It was a library of stone and spirit. The voice spoke again. "The hunters came for wealth. Others may come after them. But you, Rami, came for truth. That is why you stand here now. What will you do with what you have seen?" Rami closed his eyes. He thought of his grandfather's stories, of the villagers who feared the legend, of the hunters who sought only gold. He thought of the jungle outside, wild and timeless. When he opened his eyes, his answer was clear. "I will not take you from this place. The world is not ready. But I will protect your story. I will carry the truth, not for power, but for knowledge. People must learn to respect, not to steal." The skull's glow softened as though in approval. "Then you are truly a guardian. The tomb will remember your choice." The pedestal sank slowly into the floor, lowering the skull into the earth. Stone folded around it like petals closing on a flower, sealing it once more. The glow faded, leaving only the soft shine of the carvings. Rami felt no disappointment. Instead, he felt peace. He had not failed by leaving the skull behind. He had succeeded by honoring it. A new passage opened in the far wall leading upward. Rami followed it, climbing a long stairway that brought him back to the surface. When he stepped out, dawn was breaking over the jungle. Golden light touched the trees and birds sang as if celebrating a new day. Rami looked back at the hill that hid the tomb. From outside it looked the same, silent and covered in vines. Yet he knew what rested within, and he knew the jungle itself would guard it as it always had. He adjusted his satchel and began walking toward the village. His steps were lighter now, his spirit calm. He carried no gold, no jewels, no relics. But he carried something far greater, the truth of the skull and the duty to protect it. Some would not believe his story. Others might laugh or dismiss it. That did not matter. He had seen the guardian, the visions, and the crystal skull itself. He would share what he could, and he would keep safe what must remain hidden. As the sun climbed higher, Rami smiled to himself. The tomb had tested him, and he had passed. The crystal skull had chosen him as guardian. And though he walked alone, he felt the presence of those who had come before, and of the spirit of the skull itself, watching, guiding, and reminding him that true treasure was not in what one could take, but in what one could protect.